Okay, folks, it's Jeff Land live coming to you from Anchorage. I want to, before I start, I want to thank John Quick for being one of our sponsors for Landmine Live for the live stream. Thanks a lot, John Quick, for supporting independent journalism. Really appreciate that. Folks, if you're interested in being a sponsor for the live stream, the podcast, buying an ad on the website, get a hold of me. I'm happy to share with you the analytics and rate sheet. And if you're watching and you support the live streams and the work the Landmine is doing, please consider making a one-time or monthly recurring donation by going to alaskalandmine.com/subscribe. I want to talk about a few things today. I talked about kind of the Treg Taylor, Adam Crum videos that came out last week. Treg's is interesting. I didn't notice this till afterwards, but he filed on September 17th, and his video was posted on his YouTube channel on September 16th, the day before. And these videos take highly produced, lower 48 consulting firms, at least weeks to make. So we know he's been running for governor for the last 6 months, but his video actually came out the day before he filed, which is even more example of how this guy's been running for governor for a long time. I talked about Mike Shower being chosen as Bernadette Wilson's running mate. One thing I didn't talk about, and also I'm going to talk about Shelley Hughes, who's running for governor. There's been a lot of speculation, and they've even told people they're considering likely resigning their seats. So they're both in the Senate. Mike Shower is the minority leader. Shelley Hughes is in his Republican minority, in the Republican minority that he's the minority leader of. Now, Shelley filed a few months ago for governor. Shower just a few weeks ago was announced as Bernadette Wilson's running mate. So session starts in January. Now Shower has been more present this last session because he's minority leader, but the previous two sessions when they had the three-member minority with him, Shelley, and Rob Myers, he was kind of absent a lot. He wasn't really showing up. He was working. He's a FedEx pilot. So he's been more present, but I think Shower has been kind of, I don't want to say checked out, but I think he's kind of realized that he's not going to really do much. Even when he was in the majority before, when he was state affairs chair, he tried all this election stuff, and he got sideways with Bert Stedman and Gary Stevens and, going on the radio and talking about this binding caucus. So I think he's kind of figured out that he's really not going to do much in the legislature. So to run for governor, in his case, lieutenant governor with Bernadette, and then Shelley Hughes, who filed for governor, going to Juneau from, early January, February, March, April, May. It's going to be 4 months, 120 days, almost certainly. You really can't campaign. You can't raise money. Now I think Bernadette can still raise money because she's not a legislator. But I think Shower, I don't know how that actually works. I don't think him being in the legislature as her running mate precludes her from raising money. But for Shelley Hughes, for example, she can't raise money while she's in Juneau in the legislature when they're in session. So I think probably Shower resigns. This is what Dunleavy did. Dunleavy resigned at the end of 2017 when he decided to run for governor. That's how Shower got in. Shower got chosen to replace Mike Dunleavy eventually. If you remember, Bill Walker chose Randall Kawaki, that he was rejected by the Republicans, and then they chose that. I think Walker was trying to send a message and be funny, and one of the names the Republicans said was this guy Tom Braun, who had said some kind of wild shit on over the years on Facebook. On one of the things he said was he wanted the baby who was getting aborted to come out with a gun and kill the abortionist. That was like one of the milder things he said. So that was like backfired. And then eventually they settled on Shower, and that was in, I think, December. It was the end of the year. It was enough time to get, because the governor has 30 days to appoint someone when there's a resignation. So that's what happened when Dunleavy resigned. So I think Shower is more likely to resign than Hughes. I can't imagine Shelley wants to give up her Senate position. But if she's serious about running for governor, she's going to have to. Maybe she's waiting to see how things shake out between now and December. But here's what happens. Let's start with Shower and talk about what happens if he resigns. So if Shower resigns, his Senate seat becomes open. Now the two representatives in that Senate seat are George Rauscher, who has already filed to run for the open seat because Shower is not running for re-election, because Shower and Shelley Hughes are up for re-election in 2026, so they can't run for both. They got to pick one. So if Shower resigns, it's either McCabe or Rauscher. Now, I mean, Dunleavy could pick anybody who's qualified, but it'd be almost kind of a given that he picks Rauscher or McCabe, because then he gets to pick somebody to fill that House seat. I think he's going to pick Rauscher. He already filed. He's already, right away after Shower was chosen as Bernadette Wilson's running mate, he filed a letter of intent for the Senate seat. So I would think it's pretty likely he picks Rauscher. He could pick McCabe. I'm sure he's going to talk to them and decide. They're both very, conservative. Now, Rauscher and McCabe actually don't get along. That's kind of interesting. There's kind of no love lost there. So I think the process could be kind of loose as far as who he picks. And if he doesn't pick, if he picks, like, let's say Rauscher, for example, McCabe's going to get pissed. If you were to pick McCabe, Rauscher wouldn't be happy because whoever he picks to fill the Shower seat, if Shower resigns, is going to have a big leg up in the election next year. So I'm kind of leaning. I think he'd pick Rauscher because he already filed and he knows George really well. I mean, he knows McCabe too, but I think probably Rauscher. And then if that happens, then he gets to pick someone to fill Rauscher's seat. This is what happened with the Chris Birch situation. You remember in 2019, he passed away tragically, and then it was Revac. First it was Laddie. They rejected Laddie, the Senators, and then Revac got in there, and then he chose Mel Gillis to replace Josh Revac. So he got two people appointed. So if it's Rauscher, then Rauscher's seat's open. He has to pick someone to go for Rauscher. Now that's interesting. I don't know. One guy filed. He's independent. Forrest Wolf has moved out there, former legislative staffer, now works for the executive branch. He would probably try to get it. I'm sure a lot of people would sign up. So the way this works is the Republicans have a process. People sign up, and Democrats too, the same way. They put their name forward, and the governor interviews, and there's a Republican kind of party process, and they send names. But the names they send, there's no obligation. The governor chooses those names. Normally, I think they're going to go with one of the names, but there'll be an internal process. It's 30 days. So I mean, if I'm Shower or Shelley, you have to understand, like, he has to replace that seat, but then he has to replace the next seat if he picks one of the representatives. So I don't know Rauscher. I don't know who he would pick for the Rauscher seat, but he would get two if that were to happen. Now, if Shelley resigns, we have a situation similar to Shower. We have Kathy Tilton and Delana Johnson. Now, Kathy Tilton, after the Bernadette thing happened and Rauscher filed, and I asked her about what because it's been we've all speculated she's going to run for the Senate seat, but she hadn't made it official, or she hadn't publicly said what she's going to do. But now Shelley Hughes is running for Kathy Tilton is running for Shelley Hughes' open Senate seat. Now there's also Delana Johnson who could run. She hasn't ruled out running for the seat. So if Shelley resigns, I think they're going to put Kathy Tilton, just like with Shower. I think likely Rauscher, with Shelley Hughes likely Tilton. Then he gets to pick somebody for Tilton. Now, there's a few people that live out there. I'm not really sure. I know there's some discussion happening already about that. I know the sociopath, narcissist, Sue Happy Amy Dabosky, lunatic Amy Dabosky lives out there. The good news is with Amy, I was told by some people that if he were to pick her, which I can't even imagine, she went sideways with him when she used to be deputy chief of staff for Dunleavy years ago, but she wouldn't even have the votes to get confirmed. The Republicans wouldn't even confirm her because she hired Scott Kendall to sue Dave Bronson when he fired her for calling Rochelle Alger a CUNT. I don't even want to say the word, but if you can't get fired for that, I'm not sure what you can get fired for. But that would be another situation where the governor gets to pick someone to replace Shelley Hughes, I think Kathy Tilton, and then he replaces somebody. But these things are 30 days each, so they're thinking about, they probably have to, if they're going to do this, they're going to have to resign sometime in November. Because if they were to resign mid-November, that's 30 days to pick somebody. If he takes the whole 30 days, then you're into mid-December. Then he's got to pick, if it's Rauscher and Tilton, for example, then he's got to pick somebody to replace them. That's another 30 days. You're looking at mid-January, which is actually not great. Maybe it's even got to be earlier in November, assuming they're going to take the full 30 days. Maybe they could do it in less time. If he knows it's going to be Rauscher and Tilton, for example, it can go quicker. The House seats are going to be more difficult because there'll be no incumbent to pick. There's no lower, like with the Senate, there's the representatives below them. There's going to be a new person. So that might take a little bit longer, be more of a process. So, I'm thinking if they're going to resign, it's probably going to be, I'd say, mid-November latest. So we're talking about a few months. And they're going to be, discussing who's going to replace them. They want to have input, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to be I'm watching this very closely. They haven't really publicly said what they're going to do, but I know they're both talking with people about resigning. And it's a topic that, for Shower, he already kind of wants out, I think, so it's easier for him. But for Shelley, I think she likes being elected. It's part of her identity. But if she's serious about running for governor, you cannot spend 4 months in Juneau and not be able to campaign, not be able to fundraise. That just doesn't really. Now, maybe she might potentially decide she doesn't really have a shot at governor or isn't getting the support, and she could maybe decide to try to stay in the Senate. But that becomes more complicated because Kathy Tilton has already said she's running for the seat. So I can't imagine Kathy would want to go back to the House after she already filed for the Senate. So Shelley's in a bad. If she decides she doesn't want to run for governor, she's kind of in a bad spot. She already made her decision. Now Kathy Tilton has planted the flag. Same with George Rauscher. Now Shower, I'm in it for the long run with Bernadette for sure. She's the only one who's picked a running mate so far. So that is something watch, because that could, if they both resign, you're going to have a potentially, you'll have 4 new people, 2 new senators and 2 new representatives if Dunleavy picks Rauscher and Tilton, or potentially McCabe or Johnson, Delana Johnson, but I think it'll be Rauscher, Tilton. So that's that. Other thing I want to talk about is just what the hell Dave Bronson is up to, former Mayor Dave Bronson. Now, Dave Bronson, a couple days ago, we'll pull this up here, he filed a letter of intent with the Alaska Public Offices Commission. So here he is, Dave Bronson, state primary, no office. Didn't say what he's doing. This was filed 2 days ago. Now, normally when somebody wants to file for office, they file for office and they announce what they're doing. Sometimes an incumbent will file and they're in the House and they want to leave it open. Maybe they'll run for the Senate seat. Now, in Dave's case, he lives in Kelvin Troggy's district. James Kaufman, the senator, is not up for re-election next year. So he's either running for Kelvin Troggy's seat, which I think is very unlikely. He was the mayor. Can't imagine the former mayor is going to want to run against Calvin Troggy, or governor, which I think is more likely. But he hasn't said what he's doing. So he just files this letter, doesn't say what he's doing. And then I've tried to call him a couple times. It goes to voicemail. I've texted him. I heard maybe he's out hunting. But I mean, what kind of person files a letter and then doesn't say what it just goes dark? It's very loose. It's just kind of indicative of some of these people have no idea what they're doing when it comes to campaigning. They don't communicate. They don't tell anybody what's going on. And we're left to speculate. I think probably it's governor, and that'll make him number 11 Republican, 12 overall. The only Democrat so far in the race is Tom Begich. So I don't know what he's doing. I guess I like Dave. Personally, I like Dave. But, not a great mayor. Things did not go well. Part of it was the assembly. That was not, friendly at all, bad relationship. But then part of it was just, especially early on. I mean, he put in that lunatic Amy Demboski, which totally ended up backfiring. And he had some other, remember that Joe Gerace guy in the health department, and there was just a lot of bad people around him. And it was kind of what Dunleavy did early on, it put really bad people around him, kind of these partisan sycophants and this patronage jobs of people that kind of he's friendly with or that are like good Republicans or good conservatives. And it just, mayor's 3 years and you got to hit it running. You got to, same with governor's 4 years. Let's say you get 2 terms, 8, if the mayor 2 terms, 6, but you got to go from the beginning. And he just had such a bad start, turning the fluoride off and some of the Stars of David nonsense with these wackos at the mask mandate meetings and the sprung structure thing. And actually the navigation there was a good idea, but just never had an ability to make that happen with the assembly. I'm not saying the assembly was friendly. They weren't. They were very adversarial and they were very disruptive. But I don't know how Dave Bronson, if he does run for governor, in fact, what he's like, what's he running on? I was mayor for 3 years and nothing. Everything got worse. Nothing really improved. And now you got LaFrance in there. It's not any better. I've been very critical of her, but it's just there's nothing really for Dave Bronson to run on, other than he was mayor and then he lost, kind of badly to Suzanne LaFrance. So I guess at some point Dave Bronson's going to tell us what he's doing, and we'll figure that out. If it's governor, he'll be number 11. He did leave the job at the airport recently. He was there for like 8 months. He was the head of the Ted Stevens International Airport, and then he just kind of bailed out of that abruptly. And now it sounds like somebody said he bought a lodge. I don't know if that's, I heard he was maybe just going to retire, but now he's back somewhat. We don't know what he's doing yet because he hasn't told us and he hasn't answered the phone or a text message. So the kind of, interesting, like I said, Shelley Hughes and Mike Shower resigning, which I think Shower is probably going to resign. I think Shelley will too, but I think it's less likely. She might decide to just stay in there because she likes being in the Senate, and you're giving up power, you're giving up money, you're giving up kind of being an elected official. But if she's serious about running for governor, then she's going to resign too. So that's kind of the nobody's filed since Bronson. There's been no Bert Stedman. I talked about this in my Sunday column. Bert Stedman filed for re-election last week, and he kind of waited. There was some speculation. Dan Ortiz filed a month ago, and he might be coming back to the House, but he didn't rule out running for the Senate. I thought maybe there was a chance that Bert Stedman was done, just like Gary Stevens and Lyman Hoffman. But Bert said back when I called him, he said he was definitely running. He filed a letter for re-election, so that's interesting. He's been co-chair of the Finance Committee for a long time. Bert is either going to be next in 2027 after the next year's election, depending how the Senate organizes. Bert's either going to be like running the show or in the basement, because he's kind of made some enemies with some of the Democrats and Republicans, but he's very smart. He knows that Senate process, that Senate committee, Finance Committee better than anybody. The only, I think, big race next year, unknown, is Kathy Giesel, And so far, nobody's filed a run against Kathy Giesel. I don't think anybody's. But if Kathy gets a really good conservative, not crazy opponent, like a good Republican, not one of these kind of people that would run well in the Valley or the Kenai, but if she gets a very good conservative opponent, she could have a race because she has gone kind of way out there on she used to be like the champion of right to work, anti-labor, and then she gets a standing ovation a couple of years ago at the AFL reception in Juneau. She used to be kind of the number one oil industry person, oil industry on taxes. Now she's kind of gone on taxing oil more and also personal taxes. And she's kind of just, I think when Roger Holland beat her a couple of years ago, I think something got knocked loose and it never got put back. So if you remember in 2022, she ran, it was 2020, was it redistricting? How did that work? Anyways, she had Rosalind Casey, the Democrat, and then Roger Holland, and they all got a third of the vote. They all got like 33% or something in the general. And then the ranking happened, and she kind of eked it out. But if she has a really good, solid Republican opponent, she could have a race. And if she were to, lose, that could change how the Senate organizes next year. If she were to win, it would probably mean, I think a coalition's probably likely in the Senate again next time, but it could, one or two of these things could really make a difference. So we'll see who takes Shower's seat, probably Rauscher. We'll see who takes Tilton's seat, probably Shelley Hughes seat, probably Tilton. And then we have the Louise Stutz with running for the Gary Stevens open seat, probably Bryce Edgman running for the Lyman Hoffman open seat. He hasn't decided yet, but there will be a lot of new senators next time. So I'm going to be watching pretty closely. I want to thank John Quick for supporting the live stream, for being a sponsor. Thanks again, John. Appreciate you supporting independent journalism. John Quick down on the Kenai. And again, folks, if you want to look at sponsoring the live stream or sponsoring the podcast or buying an ad on the website, get a hold of me. I'm happy to share the rates and the analytics with you. And then if you're watching this and you like the landmine and you like what we're doing, please consider making a one-time or monthly recurring donation at alaskalandmine.com/subscribe. Really appreciate that. We'd be doing live streams all the time, talking about local politics, state politics, legislature. Juneau is about 4 months away, so we're coming up on that. It's not very soon, but it's going to be here before we know it. We got Thanksgiving around the corner, Christmas, and then boom, we're going to be getting ready to go to. I'll be down there again in Juneau for the 8th session in a row on the ground in Juneau, reporting on what's happening in the legislature. So I want to thank you all for watching.